Hey y'all, I'm Danni Danger with Screen Fanatic, and I am so excited about Sony's new animated upcoming Across the Spider-Verse. Even though the film has been delayed, I'm going to use this opportunity to just list out some of my favorite multiverse spiders that I think should be making an appearance in the upcoming film. We already have a slew of characters that we know we're going to see, right? We see the return of Miles Morales, who is the star of the show. We're also seeing a return of Spider-Gwen or Spider-Woman or Ghost Spider, depending on what name she's going by. But we love her. We know her. She's going to pull Miles back into this multiverse nonsense that we thought was fixed at the end of the last movie, but is most definitely not fixed. We also know that we'll see the return of Peter B. Parker. And thanks to some casting announcements, we're going to meet presumably Earth 616's Jessica Drew, who is Spider-Woman, which I'm so unbelievably excited about and curious as to, if we are venturing into 616 or characters from 616, which ones are we going to meet from the main Marvel universe? But we will get to that. My first guest star Spidey comes from Earth 311 and Neil Gaiman's 1602 book. This takes place in 1602, at the beginning of the Elizabethan era, when everyone's wearing ruffly collars, and we're talking about people sailing to newly colonized America. And this is where we get in Neil Gaiman's iteration of all of our different superheroes. This Earth's Spider-Man actually has quite a bit of backstory before he even becomes the Spider. He is recruited by Sir Nicholas Fury to help work for Queen Elizabeth. And of course, because this Peter is Scottish, he has to kind of change his last name because King James of Scotland is not so popular at the time. But when Elizabeth dies and King James takes over, he actually captures the Spider and is like, hey, go kill Nick Fury because he betrayed me. But instead, the Spider trucks it over to Roanoke and sets up a life in the colonies. And after all of this excitement, then he's finally bit by a spider. There is a time portal that pops up in the story, and just some random spider is affected by the radiation coming off of that time portal. Spider bites man, man becomes spider, boom. But this particular iteration of Peter, I really want to see in this universe because, let's face it, Spider-Man with a ruffly collar is really adorable. But also, I am a really big fan of the podcast Noble Blood, which kind of goes over the dramatic incidences that have occurred all throughout royal history. And this kind of has that vibe to it. And I would really love to see that make an appearance in this animated movie. Next, we have a spider from Earth 92131. I think I got that right. Go me. Which is the animated TV show from 1994. Yes, the animated shows also have their own Marvel universes. This version of Peter Parker actually originates in the Marvel 616 universe when he goes to the Savage Land and is kidnapped by Magneto, who does all kinds of experiments on him and basically devolves him into this bestial form of himself. So he becomes the Man Spider. He looks more spider than man. He's got extra arms. He's got the big bitey teeth and the multiple eyes. Obviously some scary stuff. He is, of course, healed and becomes regular boring old Peter Parker again. But this version was sort of so beloved and stuck out in people's memories that it was adapted into the 1994 Spider-Man cartoon, which so many of us grew up on. And it's just a really funny, interesting call. The character is kind of pitched as if a radioactive human bit a spider, which is just really great. And you can see throughout the Marvel universe all the ways that Spider-Man could have gone wrong. You've also got a character called Spidersman, who is just a man built entirely out of spiders. Either of these iterations of Spider-Man would be really hilarious and a whole lot of fun to see in this animated movie, even if just for a moment. When we're talking about practical spider characters that we're kind of betting on seeing in this upcoming movie, I would not be surprised to see Mayday Parker show up in this Spider-Verse, and there's a couple of reasons why. First of all, Mayday Parker is the teenage daughter of Mary Jane Watson and Peter Parker. Peter Parker, as he, of course, like he and Mary Jane get married and they go out for all of the domestic bliss. And one day Peter is fighting the Goblin and he loses a leg. So obviously this is a huge injury. It really makes him rethink his life and in terms of like what kind of danger he's putting himself in and what kind of father and husband he wants to be. So he decides to drop the mantle of Spider-Man and just really focus on like building his family. Totally respectable. We understand it. But then they keep his identity as Spider-Man as a secret from May as she grows up, who is obviously named after the now dead Aunt May. My heart. But as May starts to hit her teenage years, she, of course, starts showing signs of having spider powers. She inherited them from her father. And this really sucks kind of for Mary Jane and Peter because they're really afraid for her. They want her to be safe. They want her to be happy. And she's really driven to use her powers to help people and protect people the way her father was. And of course, Peter feels really overprotective of her and does not like this in the least. One of the reasons that I think this would work really well in one of these Across the Spider-Verse installations is because you've got Peter B. Parker, who is the famous failure to launch Spider-Man from Into the Spider-Verse, who kind of goes back to his universe and makes good with Mary Jane. And they revisit the conversation about having children, which is the conversation that broke them up, because he kind of learned a lesson in mentoring Miles that like it is a leap of faith, that being a parent is really scary, but it's also really rewarding to teach someone how to navigate the world safely. I think this dynamic of like overprotective Peter Parker and young impetuous Mayday Parker and Peter B. Parker presents a really great opportunity for Peter B to step in and say like, hey, I know it's really scary to have created this whole tiny human that's so fragile and that you're so afraid for, but you have to, again, extend out that leap of faith and let her do what she's going to do and let her be Spider-Man or Spider-Girl, as it were. All right, number 3 on my list, my third most desired Spider-Man was almost the top most desired Spider-Man because I just love him. But if he doesn't show up in Across the Spider-Verse, I might actually riot, is SpiderPunk. Do I really need to sell you on SpiderPunk? No, probably not, but I'm going to anyway. In his universe, he is also bitten by a radioactive spider. But that radioactive spider is sort of like a toxic waste, like, the world that's ravaged by capitalism. Yeah, I know, it's not this Earth, it's a different Earth ravaged by capitalism. But, but he's bitten by this radioactive spider. And in this universe, Norman Osborn has become president. And he's less of a president and more of a dictator. As you can imagine, Norman Osborn be doing Norman Osborn things. And so this SpiderPunk, his whole deal is just rebelling against Osborn's regime. And he relates very much to the working class citizens of the city who are being driven out for all sorts of awful reasons, who are being treated very poorly. So he's like the champion of these marginalized people in this really awful regime. My personal favorite SpiderPunk moment is when he takes on Osborn and he disrupts all of Osborn's technology with something like 15,000 amps, loud music. He disrupts all of his technology with loud music and defeats him by beating him over the head with a guitar. Like, yes. I need it now. My second to number 1 choice for spiders who should appear in Across the Spider-Verse is, of course, the clone Scarlet Spider. Scarlet Spider, Ben Reilly, is a fan favorite. He just finished being main title Spider-Man, if I recall correctly, and he's a clone of Peter Parker, right? But he doesn't know he's a clone. So initially he is sent to fight Peter, and in the midst of all their fighting and Peter really kind of kicking his butt, he comes to the realization that he is a clone and he was created for a purpose, but he doesn't necessarily vibe with that purpose. So he just sort of bounces out of the fight and takes 5 years to just explore what the meaning of his life is and to decide who he wants to be in this world. And after 2 years of being locked in our own houses in quarantine, I think we can all really relate to existential Spider-Man. Over the years, Scarlet Spider and Spider-Man have become really good friends. They've fought a lot of battles together and have become very close. Scarlet Spider has taken a lot of different names and has, stood in and helped Peter Parker and been a part of his life. And so that would be something that's really interesting to see, but also sort of this very dry, matter-of-fact way that he has of looking at things, because he wasn't born yesterday, but he was born as an adult, as an adult superhero, something like, I don't know, 6 months ago or 5 years ago. It's kind of a thing. And last, but not least, is another Spider from Earth 616, which is the main Marvel Comics universe. And I know that if we are getting a Jessica Drews from Earth 616, it stands to reason that it's likely that we'll probably spend a decent amount of time there. So we'll maybe meet some of its other characters, some of its other Spider family members. And the one that I want to see the most is Superior Spider-Man. Superior Spider-Man is Doc Ock in Peter Parker's body. So he's got all the spider powers. Basically, Peter Parker kind of lays dying, and Doc Ock, in order to save himself, transports his consciousness into Peter's body. And Peter's dying wish at that time is that someone continue the mantle of Spider-Man and protect New York City. And in his own weird way, Ock is very moved by this request. So he decides that he is going to be the Superior Spider-Man. And part of this is because he's emotionally moved by Peter's plea, but a bigger part of this is also Doc wants to prove that he can do Spider-Man the very best. It's kind of like a trial. It's like an emotion versus ego thing, which is really fascinating. But you also get to see this really weird, this alternate Spider-Man who is a lot harsher with his enemies. You also get to see Ock kind of learning his way around what it means to be Spider-Man. He's also got a little bit of Peter's consciousness still trapped in his head, which, spoiler alert, means that Peter gets to be alive and Peter Parker again. But, just Ock kind of living life through Peter's eyes and having the opportunity to become a good guy, but in his own way, is absolutely fascinating. And while Across the Spider-Verse and Sony's animated universe and the MCU are not the same universe at all, I think that we all got to the end of No Way Home and we're really feeling this feeling of hope and possibility for what all of the villains, but particularly Doc Ock, could be and could do and could accomplish if given the right circumstances. And that's really the core of the Spider-Man mythos, right? Is that he's this really good guy who deeply cares about what has happened to all of these villains and what they've undergone in order to become who they are. So he does fight villains, but he also searches for opportunities to bring them over to a good side, to heal some of the damage and trauma that's been done to them in order to, to help them. And this really plays into that theme of the story, that theme of the Spider-Verse, of just always being empathetic and always seeing the person that you're fighting as a person, even if they aren't a person, even if they are a giant mecha suit or a lizard. But wait, I'm not done. This one's kind of a bonus because it's not the most popular choice and it's a little weird, but I would really like to see Lily Tomlin's voice actor, Lily Tomlin's version of Aunt May, become the incredible Spider-Man. Okay, so in this version of the Spider-Verse, it is May who dutifully comes to a science thing to bring Peter his lunch because he forgot it at home, and she instead is bit by a radioactive spider. And initially kind of goes the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man route and uses her costume and abilities to make some extra cash and do things like that for her family, but eventually figures out that she can use these powers to help save people. And so Spider-Man, Spider-May is a thing. And I love that, especially because the way that, first of all, Lily Tomlin is amazing. And we love her. We love to see more of her. But the idea, like, she did play a role in, like, a background role in the battle in Into the Spider-Verse that was so funny, so enjoyable, and just a really good time. And I think it would be a really lovely callback to some of the silliness of the comics to just give her that opportunity. If they do this, please leave behind the weird Chef Boyardee style hat that, I don't know, is, I guess, supposed to be sort of shaped like Aunt May's grandma haircut at the time. Fix the costume. That's all I'm gonna ask. Sony, please, God, fix the costume. That is terrible. So that is 6 Spoodermans, technically 7 if you include Spider-Man. But that's like 7 out of a gazillion different options for amazing alternate universe Peter Parkers or other characters, lots of different Spidey peoples. Who do you want to see in the new upcoming animated feature? I really need to know down below, because I have even been polling friends about this, and I've gotten so many great suggestions. Peter Parker has been, or Spider-Man has been, a pirate and a wolf and, just about everything. So yeah, our options are kind of limitless. I'm Danni Danger with Screen Fanatic, and hey, we like to do this thing where we talk about our opinions, and then we ask you for your opinions down in the comments. One of the last opinions that I had to share was a review of Matt Reeves' The Batman, and I have now streamed it like 14 times afterwards, and I agree with everything I said. That's that.